Ancient myths hold memories of real-world shattering disasters. Our ancestors witnessed floods, eruptions, and stars falling from the sky, events that no science of their time could possibly explain. They preserved these terrifying truths not as dry records, but as powerful stories passed down for generations. By the end of this journey, you will see these ancient tales not as fiction, but as a forgotten library of catastrophic history. We will uncover how a global flood could be remembered across continents, and why a tribe knew of an invisible star. What is the most unbelievable disaster story you have ever heard? These stories are the bedrock of human memory, a collective consciousness etched not in stone, but in narrative. Think of a myth not as a single person's dream, but as the shared inheritance of an entire culture, refined and passed down like a priceless heirloom. When a disaster so immense that it defied all understanding struck a community, the event was seared into their collective psyche. The only way to carry this overwhelming truth forward was to weave it into the very fabric of their identity, into a story that could be told and retold for generations. This is how oral traditions functioned as living, breathing libraries long before the written word. Elders were the librarians, and their stories were the meticulously preserved volumes containing the most critical information for survival. Details about landscapes that vanished, climates that shifted, and skies that rained fire were embedded within the adventures of gods and heroes. This was not a game of telephone where facts get lost. It was a sacred, disciplined process of preservation. By understanding this, we can look at a tale like the Great Flood and see not a fantasy, but a coded historical record of a cataclysmic sea level rise. We can listen to a story about a fiery chariot crossing the sky and recognize the terrifying passage of a comet. This perspective transforms these ancient narratives. They become a testament to human resilience, a profound need to make sense of a chaotic world, and a desperate warning to future generations. So what kinds of earth-shattering events were so powerful, so traumatic, that they became immortalized across the globe? Perhaps the most compelling echo from our ancient past is the story of a world consumed by water. From the banks of the Euphrates to the highlands of Greece and deep into the Americas, cultures with no possible contact all tell a strikingly similar tale. A great flood, divinely sent, wipes the earth clean, sparing only a chosen few who build a vessel to survive the rising tides. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh describes a hero named Utnapishtim, instructed by a god to build a great boat to save his family and the seed of all living creatures. Sound familiar? It is a narrative blueprint that appears again in the Hebrew Bible with Noah, in Hindu texts with Manu, and in the indigenous stories of the Americas. This is not a coincidence. It is a collective memory, a trauma so vast it embedded itself into the foundation of human storytelling. But what could have caused such a universally remembered deluge? The answer may lie in a profound climatic shift at the end of the last ice age. As the great glaciers retreated, they unleashed colossal volumes of meltwater into the world's oceans. Sea levels rose hundreds of feet, not over centuries but in dramatic, rapid surges. Coastlines that had been home to generations of people for thousands of years were swallowed by the sea, vanishing in a single lifetime. Imagine the terror of watching the ocean, a stable boundary for all of remembered history, begin an inexorable march inland. The water did not stop. It consumed forests, hills, and entire settlements, forcing a massive, panicked migration. This was not a gentle rain, but a relentless, planet-scale event that reorganized the very map of the world. The survivors of those flooded coastal plains carried the story with them as they scattered across the globe. Over generations, the geological event transformed into a mythological one. The rising sea became a god's wrath. The desperate escape by any seaworthy craft became a divinely commanded ark. The eventual receding of the waters and the appearance of new land became a covenant, symbolized by the universal hope of a rainbow. The consistency of these details is what makes the flood myth so powerful. It is not just the presence of water, but the specific motifs of warning, salvation through a boat, and the preservation of life that point to a shared, real-world experience. This was humanity's first truly global catastrophe, a disaster written in water and remembered in story. If the Earth itself could hold such a powerful memory of water, what other celestial events might have left their mark on the human imagination? The sky itself can become a weapon. While the Earth reshaped itself with water, the heavens delivered their own chaos in the form of fire and stone. Across the globe, ancient cultures recorded a different kind of terror, not from rising seas, but from the cosmos turning against them. They spoke of gods waging war in the heavens, of fiery chariots crashing to the ground, and of stars that fell like rain. These are not merely fantasies. They are the likely echoes of meteor showers and comet impacts so devastating they were seared into human memory. One of the most compelling scientific hypotheses points to an event around 12,800 years ago, a period called the Younger Dryas. Scientists propose that a comet or asteroid fragmented and struck the Earth, triggering a sudden climatic reversal that plunged the planet back into Ice Age conditions. The resulting firestorms, followed by a global winter, would have meant starvation and extinction for many large animals and the human communities that relied on them. Now, listen to the stories born from that time. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories from Australia describe fire devil stones sent from the sun, falling to the earth with immense power. In Norse mythology, the wolf's girl endlessly chases the sun, a celestial pursuit that the Vikings believed would end in devouring it, plunging the world into darkness. These narratives are packed with specific, terrifying details that align perfectly with the aftermath of a cosmic impact. They tell of a sky that turned black, of a sun that was blotted out, of a deep cold that fell across the land, and of widespread famine. This was not a local event. It was a global trauma, rationalized through the only framework our ancestors had, the drama of divine beings. The preservation of these celestial calamities in myth highlights a universal human impulse to find meaning in the incomprehensible. When the very fabric of the sky seemed to tear apart, the only way to carry that memory was to weave it into a story of gods and monsters. If the sky could fall and the sun could be chased, what other terrestrial nightmares were waiting to be unleashed from the Earth's own fiery heart? Beneath the Earth's thin crust lies a restless power, a force capable of reshaping continents in a single, violent breath. When this power erupts through the surface, it creates a spectacle of absolute terror that our ancestors could only attribute to angry gods. The very ground they trusted became the source of their destruction, with mountains spewing fire and choking the sky with ash. This primal fear gave rise to some of mythology's most formidable figures and legendary fallen cities. One of the most dramatic examples is the colossal eruption of Thera, the volcanic island we now call Santorini, around the year 1600 before the Common Era. This was not a simple explosion. It was a cataclysm that may have obliterated the entire Minoan civilization on nearby Crete, sending tsunamis racing across the Mediterranean and plunging the region into a volcanic winter. The scale is almost unimaginable. The center of the island collapsed into the sea, leaving behind the iconic crescent-shaped caldera we see today. For the people who witnessed it, the world was literally coming apart. How would such an event be remembered? It echoes in the legend of Atlantis, a sophisticated island kingdom that supposedly sank beneath the waves in a single day and night. The description of a powerful civilization vanishing into the sea aligns perfectly with the fate of Minoan settlements. Furthermore, the Greek myths of the Titanomachy, the great war where the Olympian gods overthrew the older Titans, are filled with volcanic imagery. The Titans were said to be imprisoned deep beneath the earth, their struggles causing the ground to shake and spew fire. This is a perfect metaphor for the tectonic forces that lead to eruptions. Stories from around the world describe these events with uncanny accuracy. They speak of pillars of fire reaching for the heavens and rivers of smoke darkening the sun. These are not poetic inventions. They are eyewitness accounts of pyroclastic flows and towering eruption columns. The sudden, total burial of a city like Pompeii under volcanic ash is a historical fact that feels like a myth come to life. It is a frozen moment of divine punishment, a city silenced and preserved as a stark warning. These myths served a profound purpose. They were the only framework our ancestors had to explain why the earth itself would revolt against them. By attributing the chaos to a god's wrath or a battle between deities, they transformed random, unstoppable violence into a story with meaning. It was a way to process the trauma and pass down a crucial lesson: to be wary of the mountains that smoke and the ground that trembles. They are the stories of civilizations that were literally silenced, leaving behind only their ghostly echoes in our oldest tales. But what of a civilization so grand that its entire memory was swallowed by the waves? The legend of Atlantis stands as the ultimate story of a lost world, a sophisticated empire that Plato claimed sank beneath the ocean in a single day and night of misfortune. For centuries, it was dismissed as pure philosophical fiction, a cautionary tale about hubris. Yet its power endures because it echoes a truth our species has lived. Plato's descriptions of a circular city with concentric rings of water and land, of advanced engineering and sudden, total destruction, are not just imaginative details. They are a perfect literary snapshot of a volcanic caldera collapse, the exact kind of event that destroyed Thera. The Minoans, a real and powerful maritime culture, were the dominant force in the Mediterranean at that time. Their sudden disappearance from the archaeological record coincides precisely with the Thera eruption. The myth of Atlantis is not a map to a sunken continent, but a profound cultural memory of a real civilization that was literally erased from the map by the sea and the sky. This pattern of lost lands is not unique to the Mediterranean. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, mysterious underwater structures resemble a sunken city, with terraces and staircases carved by human hands or by nature's strange artistry. In India, the ancient city of Dwarka, said to have been built by the god Krishna, is described in sacred texts as being submerged by the sea. Modern marine archaeology has indeed found submerged ruins in the Gulf of Combat that align with these descriptions. Are these all just coincidences? It seems more likely that these widespread stories of sunken kingdoms are a universal human response to a universal experience. As sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, countless coastal settlements, some perhaps quite advanced for their time, were lost forever. Later generations, finding shell middens far inland or strange ruins in shallow waters, would have woven tales to explain the evidence of those who came before them. These myths fulfill a deep need to make sense of the ruins and mysteries left by our predecessors. They are not mere fantasies, but the ghostly echoes of real shorelines, real cities, and real people whose world was taken by the water. They point directly to the role of a changing climate in shaping our oldest stories. If entire cultures can vanish beneath the waves, leaving only stories behind, what other memories might be hidden in the very bones of the earth, waiting to be unearthed? The human voice was our first library, and its methods of preservation were ingeniously reliable. Storytellers and bards were not just entertainers, they were master archivists, trained in sophisticated techniques to safeguard their people's most vital memories. They wove history into epic poems and songs, employing strict rhythmic patterns and repetitive refrains. This structure acted as a mental filing system, making the stories incredibly difficult to forget or alter accidentally. A single changed word could break the entire meter, alerting the teller to an error. This was not a loose game of telephone, it was a disciplined, sacred process of replication. And the most critical information to preserve was often the most terrifying, the memory of a catastrophe. Events of profound trauma carry an intense emotional charge, which makes them far more likely to be seared into individual and collective memory. The sheer shock and scale of a disaster forced communities to encode the experience into a story-friendly format, one that could be told and retold without losing its essential warning. To make these overwhelming events manageable, storytellers used allegory and symbolism. A complex volcanic eruption with its earth-shaking tremors and raining ash might become the wrath of a mountain god. A devastating tsunami could be remembered as a great serpent uncoiling from the deep. This was not a distortion of the truth, but a simplification that preserved the core message. The allegory stripped away the confusing scientific details and left behind the fundamental lesson: this place is dangerous, the ground can betray you, the sea can rise up. These stories functioned as a cultural hard drive, storing survival information in a durable, easily transmitted format. The recurring symbols became a shared code, a way for one generation to whisper to the next across the centuries. When we recognize this sophisticated system of knowledge transfer, the reliability of these narratives comes into sharp focus. They were never meant to be literal news reports, but they were always intended to convey literal truths. The question then becomes, where can we see this system's most startling successes? What specific case studies prove that a myth can hold a perfect, frozen memory of a past world? The ocean floor holds a scar that perfectly illustrates this link between myth and catastrophe. Deep beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean lies the Burckle crater, a formation over 18 miles wide. Oceanographers have identified it as the impact site of a massive comet that struck our planet around 5,000 years ago. The force of such an impact is almost beyond comprehension, generating mega tsunamis that would have radiated outward, swamping coastlines and reshaping entire regions. Now, listen to the stories told by the people who lived along those ancient shores. Australian Aboriginal cultures preserve vivid accounts of a great flood, but their description includes a crucial detail many other flood myths lack. They speak of a star falling into the sea, and only after its celestial plunge did the great waves rise. This is not a vague metaphor, it is a precise cause and effect sequence that modern science confirms. The direction of the wave described in these oral traditions even aligns with the crater's location, pointing to a shared memory of a real, observable event. The Aboriginal storytellers did not have the concept of a comet, so they used the most fitting term in their vocabulary, a star. They recorded the event not with instruments but with narrative, preserving the essential truth for dozens of generations. This level of detail transforms the myth from a simple tale of flooding into a valuable data point for investigators. It provides geographical clues, temporal markers, and a physical mechanism for the disaster. The persistence of this specific narrative for millennia forces us to reconsider the capabilities of oral cultures. Theirs was not a primitive or haphazard form of history. It was a sophisticated system of knowledge transfer, capable of preserving complex environmental observations with stunning accuracy. This case proves that our oldest stories can be read as maps, leading us not to treasure but to truth. If a single myth can so clearly mark a cosmic impact, how many other ancient warnings are we only now learning to decipher? These ancient stories were more than just memories, they were manuals for survival. A myth about a mountain that breathed fire was not only a record of a past eruption, it was a direct instruction to future generations: stay away from mountains that smoke. The legend was a vessel carrying critical data about geological hazards, climate patterns, and the subtle signs that nature gives before a catastrophe. This transforms our understanding of these narratives from simple folklore into a sophisticated form of applied science. The Native American stories of the Seven Devils Mountains in Idaho are a perfect example. The peaks are named for a legend about 7 evil giants who were turned to stone, and their fiery breath and rumbling voices are clearly descriptions of volcanic activity. The story is a symbolic warning, a permanent label on a dangerous landscape. It taught people to recognize the precursors, the rumbles and the gases, and to steer clear. This is not unique. Myths from the Pacific Northwest describe a great thunderbird that battled a whale, causing the earth to shake and the seas to rise. This is a brilliant allegory for a megathrust earthquake and the tsunami that follows. The story encodes the sequence of events. The shaking comes first, then the water, providing a life-saving timeline for anyone who understood its code. These narratives taught listeners to be hyper-observant. A sudden migration of animals, an unusual stillness in the birds, or a specific shift in the wind could all be embedded within a story as the actions of a trickster spirit or an omen from the gods. This was how communities without written records developed an early warning system. They turned hard-won, tragic experience into a memorable, repeatable lesson. By personifying natural forces, they made the lessons stick. It is far easier to remember the story of an angry god trapped under a mountain than it is to recall a dry geological fact about tectonic plate subduction. This pragmatic intelligence ensured that the knowledge outlived the individuals who first learned it, becoming a core part of the culture's resilience. The very act of telling the story was a rehearsal for survival, a way to keep the entire community vigilant. This functional genius makes you wonder about the immense psychological weight these events must have carried, and how that trauma, in turn, shaped the myths themselves. A disaster does not just reshape the land, it rewires the human mind. The psychological shockwave of a cataclysm travels through generations, permanently altering how a culture sees the world and its place in it. This deep, collective trauma finds its voice in the grandest themes of mythology, particularly in the hauntingly universal idea of cyclical time, where worlds are destroyed and reborn. Hindu cosmology describes immense cycles called yugas, where each age descends further from righteousness until the world is cleansed by fire or flood, only to begin again. The Aztecs believed we are living in the era of the fifth sun, with 4 previous worlds having been destroyed by jaguars, wind, fire, and water. These are not just colorful creation stories. They are the psychological imprint of a lived reality where entire ways of life were, in fact, wiped out and had to be rebuilt from the ashes. This recurring motif is a form of catastrophism etched into the human psyche. It reflects a profound understanding, born from brutal experience, that stability is an illusion and that the cosmos itself operates in violent, regenerative cycles. The trauma of losing everything, of seeing the sun blotted out or the sea swallow the land, created a cultural memory so potent it demanded to be structured into the very rhythm of existence. The world had ended before, and so it could end again. This transformed myth from a simple record of the past into a desperate warning for the future. By embedding the catastrophe into their cosmology, our ancestors ensured the memory would never fade. It became a core part of their cultural DNA, a story told not for entertainment but for survival. The emotional weight of these narratives, their visceral power and somber tone, is what gives them such longevity. We are not just hearing a story, we are feeling the echo of an ancient fear. This emotional dimension is the key that unlocks their symbolic language. When a myth speaks of a world-ending flood, it is also speaking of profound loss and the fragile hope of renewal. When it describes the fall of a great city, it is encoding the trauma of societal collapse. To understand these stories, we must learn to listen for the heartbeat of human anxiety that pulses within them. They are testaments to our species' incredible resilience, our stubborn refusal to let even the most shattering events be forgotten. This raises a profound question for our own time, as we face a world altered by our own actions. What stories are we creating now, and what truths will they whisper to those who come after us? These mythical beasts were not born from idle fantasy. The dragon that terrorizes a village in legend often represented a very real and terrifying river, its serpentine body mirroring the water's winding path across the landscape, its fiery breath a metaphor for the destructive, consuming power of a flash flood. Ancient cultures mastered this symbolic language, using the most powerful images they could conceive to personify the natural forces they could not control. In China, the legendary figure Yu the Great is credited with taming the epic floods that plagued the Yellow River basin. But Yu is not depicted fighting a simple river. His adversary is a dragon, a chaotic water spirit whose unruly movements caused the land to drown. The story details how Yu labored for 13 years, dredging channels and building dikes not to slay the beast but to guide and pacify it. This is a perfect allegory for early hydraulic engineering. The myth preserves the memory of a colossal, generations-long struggle to control a volatile river system, transforming a complex civil project into an epic battle against a divine creature. The dragon was the river. The Norse understood this language of the earth just as well. Their world was bound by the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, a beast so immense it encircled the entire globe, biting its own tail. The myths say that when this serpent stirs, the very foundations of the world tremble, causing earthquakes that shake the land of humans. This is not just a dramatic image, it is a precise geological observation encoded in a terrifying form. The people of Scandinavia lived in a seismically active region, and the story of the Midgard serpent provided a framework for understanding why the solid ground beneath their feet could suddenly become unstable and violent. The serpent's movements were the tectonic shifts they could feel but not see. Learning to translate this symbolic code is like finding a key to a hidden library. A giant stomping its foot and splitting the earth is not just a giant, it is the personification of a fault line rupturing. A multi-headed hydra that regrows its heads could symbolize a river delta with its countless, shifting channels, where blocking one waterway only causes another to open. These stories allowed our ancestors to package complex environmental data into a memorable and transmissible format. The narrative itself became a living map, detailing the dangers and behaviors of their world. So when archaeology uncovers evidence of a massive ancient landslide in a region whose myths speak of a sleeping stone giant that once turned over in its slumber, we are no longer looking at coincidence. We are witnessing two different records of the same event, one buried in the soil and the other preserved in the timeless currency of story. The story does not end with the spoken word, for the earth itself keeps its own records. What was once dismissed as pure legend is now being unearthed piece by piece by the trowels of archaeologists. The city of Troy is the most famous example, long thought to be a beautiful fiction from Homer's Iliad. Then archaeologists uncovered its massive walls and evidence of a catastrophic siege, proving a poetic war was rooted in a real, bloody conflict. This pattern repeats itself across the globe. In the Indus Valley, one of the cradles of civilization, excavations reveal a sophisticated society that mysteriously declined. The archaeological record shows signs of prolonged drought and shifting river patterns, events that are eerily echoed in the ancient Vedic texts of India, which describe a great river, the Sarasvati, drying up. The myth and the dirt are telling the same story of a civilization undone by a changing climate. This convergence goes beyond cities. Scientists drilling into seafloor sediments off the coast of India have found layers of sand and marine microfossils deposited far inland, clear evidence of a massive tsunami. This physical evidence aligns perfectly in time with the Burckle crater impact, giving geological weight to the Aboriginal memory of a star falling and a great wave rising. Similarly, ice cores drilled from deep within Greenland's glaciers act as a timeline of Earth's atmosphere. They contain distinct, sharp layers of volcanic ash, and when scientists analyze these, they can match them to specific, colossal eruptions. One such layer from a volcano in Iceland around the year 536 corresponds exactly with historical and mythical accounts from Europe and Asia of a year without a summer, of frosts in July and widespread famine. The Irish annals tell of a failure of bread, and Byzantine records speak of a mysterious, enduring dry fog. The ice cores confirm the cause, a volcanic winter so severe it was seared into the memory of countless cultures. This growing body of evidence forces a dramatic shift in how we view these ancient stories. They are not allegory alone, but a form of alternative historiography, a way of writing history through narrative when ink and paper did not exist. The myth provides the human experience, the terror, and the cultural impact, while the archaeology and geology provide the physical proof of the event itself. Together, they form a complete picture, validating the core truth held within the tale. This partnership between the scientist and the storyteller is rewriting our understanding of the human past. It compels us to listen more carefully to the oldest stories we have, for they may still hold vital clues, waiting for the right technology or the right discovery to unlock their final secrets. How do we systematically decode these ancient warnings? The methodology itself is a fascinating detective story. This rigorous approach to ancient stories is called geomythology, a field dedicated to untangling fact from folklore by holding myths up to the hard light of scientific evidence. It treats these narratives as potential records, not of gods, but of ground-shaking, climate-altering events. The first step is often to identify the mythemes, the fundamental building blocks of a story that appear again and again across disconnected cultures. A great flood is a mytheme. A world-ending fire is a mytheme. The specific detail of animals being led to safety in a boat is a powerful mytheme. When the same core story appears in dozens of cultures with no possible contact, it points toward a shared, real-world experience rather than a shared imagination. Researchers then act like detectives at a cosmic crime scene, gathering clues from wildly different sources. They analyze linguistics, tracing the evolution of words for disaster. They consult climatology, examining ice core and sediment data for signs of ancient droughts or volcanic winters. They turn to archaeology, looking for evidence of tsunami debris or suddenly abandoned cities. By triangulating this data, they can often pinpoint a probable time and location for the event at the heart of the myth. The final, most delicate task is to peel back the layers of the story itself. Later cultural additions, theological explanations, and local symbolism are carefully separated from the original, raw account of the disaster. It is a process of reverse engineering the narrative, stripping away the divine wrath to reveal the volcanic eruption, or looking past the great serpent to see the earthquake. This meticulous, interdisciplinary method transforms mythology from a collection of fables into a new, deeply human archive of our planet's turbulent history. And by applying this very process, one overwhelming pattern comes into undeniable focus: the stunning universality of certain cataclysms. Why do the same disaster themes haunt the human imagination from every corner of the globe? The same ancient fears haunt cultures an ocean apart. You find tales of a world consumed by fire in the Norse prophecy of Ragnarok, where Surtur the fire giant sets the cosmos ablaze. The same theme echoes in the Aztec myth of the fourth sun, a previous age destroyed by a rain of fire from the heavens. These are not isolated fantasies. They are the likely memory of a planetary-scale event, a period of global cooling triggered by a volcanic eruption or a cosmic impact so immense it filled the atmosphere with dust, blocking out the sun for years. Imagine the relentless chill, the crops failing season after season, the slow, creeping famine that spared no one. Every human community, from the forests of Scandinavia to the highlands of Mexico, would have experienced this same prolonged winter. They did not know it was an impact winter, so they explained it with the most powerful imagery they possessed. The sun was being chased by a wolf, a fire giant was on the move. The gods were angry. This parallel development in storytelling is a direct result of a shared global trauma. Our ancestors were not just making up stories. They were bearing witness, recording the same terrifying data points in the only language they had. This universality transforms these myths from local folklore into a collective human heritage, a global library of near-extinction events. It forces us to see our history as deeply interconnected, bound together by the same celestial threats, and that raises a profound question. If the entire planet could be thrown into chaos by a single event from the sky, how did our ancestors turn their eyes upward to track the very source of their fears? The night sky was our ancestors' first calendar and their first prophet, a vast canvas where gods painted their warnings. Eclipses, comets, and supernova did not just light up the heavens, they ignited a primal fear, becoming inextricably linked in the human mind with the disasters that so often followed on the ground. This narrative connection between celestial signs and earthly calamities is not mere superstition. It is a form of historical record written in starlight. One of the most compelling examples is the supernova that created the Crab Nebula. In the year 1054, a new star blazed so brightly in the daytime sky that Chinese astronomers meticulously recorded its position and gradual fading. At almost the exact same time, on the other side of the world, a people in the American Southwest carved what we now call the Chaco Canyon petroglyph. It shows a crescent moon positioned right beside a huge, radiant star. The date, deduced from the moon's phase, aligns perfectly with the Chinese records. Two cultures with no possible contact both preserved the same celestial event, one with ink and one with stone. For the Chinese, it was an astronomical observation. For the Native Americans, it was likely a powerful omen, a story etched into the rock for all time. This convergence gives the myth a profound credibility, proving that the event was real and globally witnessed. The same analytical lens can be turned on the biblical Star of Bethlehem. While not a disaster, it was remembered as a herald of a world-changing event. Historians and astronomers have proposed it could have been a rare triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, creating an unusually brilliant point of light, or perhaps Halley's Comet, which would have been visible around the likely time of the Nativity. A comet with its long, ethereal tail would have been a terrifying and awe-inspiring sight, easily interpreted as a divine announcement. The key is that the myth preserved the memory of an extraordinary celestial phenomenon, anchoring a pivotal story in a real, observable event. These astronomical references are not just decorative, they are chronological anchors. They provide a timestamp, proving that the stories containing them originated in a specific moment in history. When a myth speaks of the sun dying in the sky, it could be a memory of a total solar eclipse, an event that turns day into an eerie, sudden night, stopping hearts and silencing birds. The consistent accuracy of these celestial descriptions forces us to admit that our ancestors were not just storytellers, they were impeccable observers. They faithfully recorded what they saw, and then they wove those observations into the fabric of their understanding, connecting the dance of the cosmos to the fate of their lives on the ground. This intricate dance between sky and earth points toward cataclysms of a more intimate, yet equally devastating scale. A single valley can hold the memory of its own destruction, a scar so deep it becomes legend. While global disasters left their mark on humanity's collective consciousness, smaller, more focused cataclysms were carved just as indelibly into the identity of the people who witnessed them. These localized narratives often preserve an almost journalistic level of detail, a map of a single, terrible day from 1,000 years ago. In the American West, the Native American tribes of the region tell a powerful story of a great lake that once existed, and of the day the earth wall holding it back tore open. Their oral histories describe a massive body of water, now known to geologists as Lake Bonneville, which covered much of modern-day Utah. The legends speak of a rock giant that formed a natural dam, and of the giant's eventual collapse. When this happened, they say, a wall of water taller than the tallest trees thundered down the Snake River plain, scouring the landscape down to bedrock. This is not a vague allegory. It is a precise account of a real geological event that occurred approximately 17,000 years ago. The Bonneville flood was one of the largest flash floods in our planet's history, and the native story captures its scale and terror with stunning accuracy, right down to the specific pathway the water took. This was not a global myth, but a hyperlocal memory so potent it survived the rise and fall of countless generations. Across the world, a similar story is etched into Greek memory. The myth of Deucalion's flood tells of a great deluge sent by Zeus to punish humanity. Deucalion and his wife Thera survived by building a chest, floating upon the waters for 9 days and 9 nights before landing on a mountain. For a long time, this was considered just another variation of the global flood myth. But modern geology offers a startlingly specific interpretation. Around 7,600 years ago, the Mediterranean Sea, swollen with meltwater from the retreating Ice Age, catastrophically breached a natural land bridge at the Bosporus. What followed was a cataclysm of unimaginable fury, as a roaring waterfall 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls poured into a basin that was then a much smaller freshwater lake. The water level of this basin, which would become the Black Sea, rose relentlessly, inundating over 60,000 square miles of fertile coastline in less than a year. Any farming communities living on that low-lying shore would have witnessed an apocalypse, a horizon of water advancing day by day, swallowing their world forever. The story of Deucalion, with its 9 days and nights of floating and its landing on a high mountain, fits this event perfectly. It is the cultural memory of the people who lived on the fringes of that expanding sea, a trauma preserved as a divine judgment. What makes these localized myths so compelling is their geographical precision. They are not about a vague, worldwide flood, but about this river valley being scoured clean or that inland sea violently forming. The details in the stories act as coordinates, allowing geologists and archaeologists to pinpoint the exact location of the ancient disaster. This specificity reveals a crucial principle of cultural memory, a brutal kind of selectivity. Only the most shattering, landscape-altering events earn the right to be woven into the eternal fabric of myth. A bad storm would be forgotten in a generation, but a flood that carved a new canyon or a sea that drowned an entire coastal plain. That was a story for the ages. These regional tales do more than just record disaster. They hold clues to the very movements of ancient peoples, marking the points where history was irrevocably changed by the ground itself giving way. The paths our ancestors walked are still visible today, not etched in stone, but woven into the very stories they told. As these early humans fanned out from their ancient homelands, they carried with them a precious cargo of memory, a collection of core myths about the world-shattering events their people had survived. The Great Flood, the sky of falling fire, the trembling earth, these were not tales left behind. They were heirlooms of survival, packed for the long journey into the unknown. This global diaspora becomes the key to understanding why a story from the floodplains of Mesopotamia could resonate so powerfully in the highlands of the Americas. It was a story that traveled. Genetic evidence now maps these human migrations with stunning clarity, tracing the lineages of populations as they moved across continents over thousands of years. Linguists follow a similar trail, analyzing the roots of words and the structures of languages to reconstruct a family tree of human communication. And nestled within that tree, like seeds carried on the wind, are the mythemes, the fundamental units of these disaster stories. The narrative of a global deluge is one such seed. It likely sprouted from a single, traumatic source event, perhaps the post-glacial sea level rises that drowned continental shelves. As groups of people moved away, they took this foundational story with them. Then, a remarkable process of adaptation began. A people arriving in a mountainous new land might retell the flood myth, but now the hero's boat comes to rest on the peak of a local volcano, not Mount Ararat. A culture dependent on the sea might transform the villain from a chaotic river dragon into a monstrous leviathan of the deep. The core truth of the cataclysm remained, but its characters and settings were recast with local actors and landscapes. This explains both the stunning similarities and the fascinating variations we see worldwide. The flood is universal, but the god who sends it, the hero who builds the vessel, and the animal that brings the hopeful sign are all uniquely local. This journey of myth is more than a curiosity. It is a testament to our shared origins. It reveals a profound truth that humanity's oldest stories are bound together by a common thread of catastrophe and resilience. We are all, in a very real sense, the children of survivors, and our foundational myths are the heirlooms we all share. This ancient narrative map of human movement now finds a powerful echo in the most modern of sciences, inviting a profound dialogue across the ages. Two different libraries hold the records of our planet's violent past. One is written in the language of seismic data and sediment cores, the other in the epic poetry of gods and heroes. Placing these accounts side by side reveals a startling dialogue. Take the story of Noah's flood. The scientific counterpart is the Black Sea deluge hypothesis, which suggests a catastrophic inundation around 7,600 years ago. The myth tells of a divine punishment, a vast ark, and a world reborn from water. The geology describes a collapsing land bridge at the Bosporus and a thundering cascade that transformed a freshwater lake into a saltwater sea. The two stories converge on the core event, a devastating, landscape-altering flood. Yet they diverge in their explanation. Science gives us the mechanism, the rising sea levels and the breached sill. Myth gives us the meaning, the human terror, the sense of moral reckoning, and the profound hope symbolized by a dove and a rainbow. One tells us how the water moved, the other tells us how it felt. This same pattern emerges with the legend of Atlantis and the eruption of Thera. Plato's narrative describes a sophisticated island kingdom that sank beneath the waves. Volcanology provides the physical evidence of a caldera collapse so massive it vaporized an island and triggered tsunamis that shattered a civilization. The myth captures the totality of the loss, the abrupt erasure of a powerful culture. The science diagrams the pyroclastic flows and quantifies the cubic miles of ejected rock. Where myth speaks of Poseidon's wrath, science points to a build-up of magma and tectonic strain. The limitations of each system are also clear. A myth, passed down for generations, can compress time and personify forces, potentially losing precise chronology but retaining the emotional and cultural impact. Science can sometimes reconstruct the event with stunning accuracy but cannot convey the sheer, gut-wrenching fear of watching your world end. This is not a contest where one must be right and the other wrong. They are complementary narratives, two halves of a whole truth. Science explains the mechanics of the catastrophe, while myth preserves its soul, the lived human experience. When we learn to read them together, these ancient stories transform. They are no longer just records of the past. They become a unique form of data, a repository of human observation that can guide scientific inquiry. By listening to the persistent warnings in our oldest tales, we might even learn to predict where the next great rupture in the earth or the next wave from the sea is most likely to strike. Ancient myths are a blueprint for survival in a world we are only just beginning to understand. These stories do more than recount past horrors. They encode patterns of planetary behavior on a scale our short historical records cannot capture. Science excels at predicting the weather next week or the path of a hurricane, but it struggles with events that occur once every few thousand years. Our instrumental data only goes back a century or two, a mere blink in geological time. This is where myth becomes an invaluable tool, extending our timeline and offering a deep time perspective on catastrophe. The relentless repetition of flood myths across every continent is a stark reminder that sea levels have risen dramatically before and can do so again. Our ancestors witnessed coastlines drowning, and they preserved that trauma as a warning. Today, with polar ice melting at an unprecedented rate, that ancient warning feels less like a legend and more like a prophecy. These narratives often contain more than just the disaster itself. They detail the precursors. A tribe that flees inland because the animals are behaving strangely is recording the signs of an impending tsunami. A story about the ground rumbling for days before a mountain explodes is a textbook description of volcanic foreshocks. Our ancestors were master observers, and they embedded these survival cues into their most sacred stories. By treating these myths as long-term data sets, we can start to identify cycles. If a culture speaks of a great fire from the sky recurring every few generations, it might point to a region prone to meteor showers or a volatile comet with a long-period orbit. The collective memory of supervolcanic eruptions, which can plunge the planet into a decade-long winter, exists in dozens of myths about a stolen sun or a long, bitter night. These are not fantasies, they are memories of real climate-altering events. This forward-looking application transforms our relationship with the past. It means that the story of Atlantis is not just about a lost civilization, but a case study in how a sophisticated society can be erased by geological forces. The legend of the Great Flood becomes a lesson in coastal vulnerability and the necessity of adaptation. Science gives us the models and the physics, but myth gives us the context and the human scale. It reminds us that these are not abstract probabilities, but events that have shattered human lives time and again. Our technological prowess might make us feel secure, but the whispers from our deepest past suggest we should be listening more closely. What other survival manuals have we left unread on the shelves of antiquity? A sediment core can tell us the year a volcano exploded, but it cannot capture the terror of a mother running with her child as hot ash rains from the sky. This is the profound limitation of our most powerful scientific tools. They reconstruct the event, but they cannot recover the experience. They give us the date of the catastrophe, but not the desperate prayers that were whispered into the choking air. This is the gap that myth was designed to fill. It provides the human heartbeat within the geological data. When science encounters an event so sudden and so total that it leaves only a thin layer of carbon in the soil, the story survives to give that layer a voice. It tells us not just that people died, but how they lived in their final moments, and more importantly, how the survivors found a way to carry on. These narratives preserve the social fabric torn apart by disaster, the breakdown of order, the migrations of the displaced, and the birth of new rituals to ward off future terror. A scientific model might explain the mechanics of a mega tsunami, calculating wave height and speed. But only a myth can explain why a culture that once revered the ocean began to tell stories about a vengeful sea serpent for the next 1,000 years. That emotional shift, that deep-seated cultural trauma, is a form of data that no core sample can ever contain. Some ancient events were so bizarre or complex they defy our modern classifications. Take the accounts from various traditions of a long, twisting night or a sun that stood still in the sky. Science can offer hypotheses, from intense auroral activity to atmospheric phenomena caused by volcanic dust. Yet the full, multi-sensory experience of such an event, the global disorientation and the psychological impact of a broken cosmic cycle, is something only the myths can convey with any authenticity. They are the witness statements from a trial held by nature itself. This is why the detailed accounts from isolated cultures are so invaluable. An oral tradition from a remote island chain, untouched by outside influence for millennia, holds a pure sample of an ancient memory. Their story of the fire mountain is not corrupted by other narratives. It is a unique dataset, a singular perspective on a shared planetary history. To dismiss it as mere folklore is to willfully ignore a vital source of evidence. Embracing this narrative record does not weaken science, it completes it. It forces a humility upon us, a recognition that our instruments can only measure so much. The deepest truths about our past are held not just in rock and ice, but in the stories we have told each other for generations, around fires long gone cold, under the same stars that witnessed the original cataclysm. Isolation acts as a natural time capsule for memory. In the remote highlands of New Guinea or the deep heart of the Amazon basin, cultures developed for thousands of years with minimal contact from the outside world. Their mythological traditions were not blended with those of passing traders or conquering armies. This remarkable isolation created a unique preservation environment for ancient disaster stories, keeping them in a state of near purity that offers researchers an uncorrupted glimpse into the past. While flood myths from Europe and Asia were often rewritten by scribes to fit new religious doctrines, the same stories told by isolated tribes remained faithful to their original form, free from the influence of syncretism. The Yanomami people of the Amazon rainforest, for instance, tell of a time when the world was consumed by a great fire and a subsequent flood, a story that has remained consistent across generations. This narrative is not just a simple tale of destruction. It contains specific details about the sky turning black with smoke and the forest being utterly silent beforehand. For a people whose entire existence is tied to the rainforest, these are not vague poetic images. They are precise observations that perfectly describe the atmospheric conditions and animal behavior preceding a massive, region-wide wildfire or the distant eruption of a volcano. Similarly, consider the flood myths preserved by the most isolated people on Earth, the Sentinelese of the North Sentinel Island. Their complete seclusion means their stories have never been filtered through an outside interpreter. While we cannot know their myths directly, their sustained survival through major climatic events like the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami suggests they possess profound, localized knowledge of their environment, likely encoded in their oral traditions. These narratives are priceless data points. When a story from an isolated culture describes a mountain that wept fire, we can be more confident that it refers to a specific, local volcanic eruption rather than a borrowed metaphor from a neighboring culture. This purity allows scientists to cross-reference these myths with geological records from that specific region, creating a powerful, localized verification method. The value of these stories extends beyond their own content. They act as a control group for the study of global mythology. By analyzing the clean, unadulterated structure of an isolated tribe's flood myth, researchers can better identify which elements in a more widespread story, like Noah's flood, are likely the original core and which were added later through cultural exchange. These pristine narratives remind us that the original purpose of these stories was not entertainment or theological argument, but pure, unvarnished survival. They are the clearest signal we have from the deep past, a signal that has not been distorted by the noise of history. A society's deepest beliefs become the lens through which it views catastrophe. When the same disaster strikes two different cultures, the stories they tell can be as different as night and day. The raw geological facts of a flood or an earthquake remain the same, but the human meaning assigned to it is filtered through a powerful cultural context. A civilization ruled by priests and kings might interpret a deluge as a sign of divine displeasure with a specific leader. An agricultural community, whose life depends on a delicate balance between sun, soil, and rain, might see the same flood as a violent rupture in the natural order, a battle between earth and water spirits. This cultural lens acts as a powerful editor, deciding which details of the event are preserved, which are softened, and most importantly, what moral lesson the community is meant to carry forward. Compare the Great Flood as told in two ancient societies. In the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, the gods decide to send a flood to destroy humanity. Their reasoning is shockingly arbitrary, born not from a need for justice, but from a simple annoyance that humans are too noisy. The god E, who warns the hero Utnapishtim, does so through a trick, whispering the plan through a reed wall because he is sworn to secrecy. The entire narrative is steeped in the capricious nature of the gods. They are unpredictable, prone to petty squabbles, and humanity is merely a pawn in their divine games. Survival depends not on being morally good, but on having a personal connection to a fickle deity. Now, listen to the Hindu version of the flood from the Satapatha Brahmana. Here, a pious man named Manu is washing his hands when a small fish swims into his cupped palms. The fish pleads for protection, promising to save Manu from a future deluge. Manu carefully raises the fish, which is later revealed to be the god Vishnu in disguise. When the flood comes, Manu builds a boat as instructed and is saved, later repopulating the earth. The moral framework is entirely different. The disaster is not a random act of divine pique, but a cyclical cleansing of the world. Survival is a direct reward for Manu's compassion, his piety, and his unwavering obedience to a divine plan. The same cataclysm, water covering the land, produces two opposing lessons. One teaches that the universe is unpredictable and survival depends on cunning. The other teaches that the universe is just and rewards virtue. The culture's core values dictated the story's soul. This interpretive force is why we cannot simply strip a myth of its gods and heroes to find a neat historical report. We must first understand the society that told it, the political structure, the religious hierarchy, the relationship with the natural world. All of these factors sculpted the narrative. A story from a warrior culture will frame survival as a feat of strength. A story from a shamanistic tribe will emphasize dreams and omens. Recognizing this shaping power is not a step toward dismissing these stories, but a crucial step toward hearing their true message. The historical event is the seed, but the culture is the soil that determines how the story grows. As we stand today facing our own potential cataclysms, what stories are our own cultural values preparing us to tell? Mythology is not a closed book from a distant past, but a living process unfolding around us right now. In our hyper-connected scientific world, we are witnessing the birth of new foundational stories in real time. Catastrophic events of our own era are rapidly acquiring the same mythic qualities that define the ancient tales of floods and falling stars. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was not just a geological event, it was a narrative crucible. In its aftermath, stories emerged that transcended mere news reports. We heard countless accounts of heroic sacrifices, of parents lifting children to safety, of strangers forming human chains against the crushing water. These are not just facts, they are the raw materials for legend, the modern equivalent of a lone survivor building an ark. The disaster was so immense, so beyond everyday understanding, that people instinctively reached for a larger framework to give it meaning. Some interpreted it as a punishment from nature for environmental hubris, a classic theme of divine retribution. Others spoke of miraculous survions, of people being swept out to sea and returning days later against all odds, stories that echo the archetypal journey of a hero returning from the underworld. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, generated an even more potent and complex mythology. Almost instantly, the event was framed in epic terms, a story of good versus evil, of innocent victims and monstrous villains. The firefighters who rushed into the falling towers were cast as legendary paladins, their bravery etched into the national consciousness as a sacred story. The date itself, 9/11, became a powerful symbol, a shorthand for a world-changing cataclysm, much like the Great Flood was for ancient cultures. These modern events show us that myth-making is not a primitive failure to understand science, but a fundamental, hardwired human response to collective trauma. We cannot process chaos on such a scale without weaving it into a narrative that has a beginning, a moral conflict, and a lesson for the future. The recent COVID-19 pandemic further proves this point. A mysterious, invisible threat swept the globe, causing widespread death and disorientation. How did societies respond? They created new heroes, the doctors and nurses on the front lines, often portrayed in almost angelic terms. They identified villains, whether a foreign government or non-compliant citizens. They developed rituals, from nightly applause for healthcare workers to the sacred act of mask-wearing, which served as both practical protection and a symbolic shield against the unknown. Conspiracy theories flourished not as mere lies, but as modern-day etiological myths, attempting to explain the origin of the evil and assign blame, providing a comforting, if false, sense of order in the face of randomness. Watching these new myths form gives us an unprecedented window into the ancient process. We see how raw facts are selected, amplified, and woven into a larger, meaningful tapestry that helps a culture survive its deepest shocks. This continuous cycle of creation connects us directly to our ancestors who looked at a drowned coastline and saw a god's wrath. It urges us to re-evaluate the histories we have dismissed as mere fiction, recognizing them as the desperate, brilliant, and enduring attempts of people just like us to make sense of a world that had shattered. A talking fish that warns of a coming flood is not a children's fable. It is a potential survival guide. The most baffling elements of mythology, the parts we dismiss as pure fantasy, often hold the most crucial keys to understanding the real-world events that inspired them. Our ancestors did not have our scientific vocabulary. They could not say a drop in barometric pressure caused animals to act erratically. Instead, they told a story about birds whispering warnings. They could not describe the complex, coiling cloud formations of a supercell thunderstorm, so they envisioned a multi-headed serpent, each mouth spewing a different kind of destruction: wind, rain, and hail. These were not lies, they were sophisticated allegories, a symbolic language designed to package complex environmental data into a memorable, transmissible format. Think of a multi-limbed god like the Hindu Shiva, who both creates and destroys through dance. This could be a profound personification of the seismic forces that build mountains in one violent convulsion and level cities in the next. The dance is the earthquake, a chaotic, powerful, and transformative movement of the earth itself. The legend of the Norse wolf Fenrir, a beast so fearsome the gods had to bind it with a magical ribbon, might be a metaphor for a raging river finally being contained by a glacial ice dam, a constant, terrifying threat held in a precarious check. Even the idea of gods walking the earth could be a distorted memory of encountering survivors from a more advanced but now collapsed civilization. Imagine a Stone Age tribe encountering the last engineers from a sinking city like Atlantis. Their knowledge of architecture or astronomy would seem so far beyond understanding that they could only be described as divine or supernatural beings. This interpretive framework does not ask us to believe in magic. It asks us to see the keen observation behind the magic. It treats our ancestors not as primitive storytellers, but as brilliant coders who used the narrative software of their time to record hard data. By learning to decrypt their symbolic language, we stop dismissing their stories and start listening to their testimony. The wildest parts of the myth are not the parts to skip, they are the parts to study most closely. They are the bolded, underlined sections of an ancient emergency broadcast. This respectful re-evaluation of their wisdom brings us to one final, breathtaking case study that ties all these threads together. A story that proves the human voice can preserve a perfect memory of the sky for thousands of years. The Dogon people of Mali hold a secret about the stars that seems to defy time itself. Their ancient oral traditions describe the star Sirius in astonishing detail, speaking of a tiny, incredibly heavy companion star that orbits it every 50 years. They call this invisible star Potolo, and they knew it was made of a metal heavier than iron, a substance they said was the most fundamental element in the universe. For an isolated tribe with no telescopes, this knowledge is staggering. Western astronomy only confirmed the existence of this white dwarf star, Sirius B, in the 19th century, needing powerful lenses to observe what the Dogon had spoken of for generations. How is this possible? The mystery splits into two profound possibilities. One theory suggests a forgotten encounter, that the Dogon or their ancestors received this knowledge from a more technologically advanced civilization, perhaps even visitors from beyond our world who imparted this celestial map. The other, more haunting idea is that this is not borrowed knowledge but a preserved memory. Could Sirius B have once been visible? Some astronomers speculate that if it was a red giant in the distant past, or if it underwent a brilliant nova event, our ancestors might have seen it as a temporary, blazing twin to Sirius before it faded into the dense, invisible dwarf it is today. The Dogon story would then be the fossilized echo of that celestial spectacle, a direct observation encoded into myth and passed down with meticulous accuracy across countless generations. This single case study crystallizes the entire journey we have taken. It forces us to confront the unnerving fact that our oldest stories can be vessels for information that seems to transcend the known capabilities of the people who told them. The Dogon mystery is a perfect, unresolved chord at the end of a long symphony of evidence. It does not offer a neat answer, but a powerful, lingering question, a reminder that the deepest wells of human memory have not yet been fully measured. What other precise truths are waiting in the stories we have yet to truly hear? Our journey through these ancient stories reveals a profound and startling truth about our ancestors. They were far more than simple storytellers. They were the dedicated custodians of history, using the most powerful tool at their disposal, narrative, to safeguard the memory of earth-shattering events. From the global trauma of rising seas to the terror of comets scouring the sky, these myths functioned as a resilient, long-term memory system for our entire species. They were a living library, ensuring that the most critical survival data was never lost, even when cities turned to dust and coastlines vanished beneath the waves. This perspective transforms the relationship between science and myth. They are not adversaries locked in a battle for truth, but essential partners in the grand quest to understand our past and prepare for our future. Science provides the physical evidence, the dates and the data, while myth gives that evidence a human heartbeat, preserving the fear, the loss, and the hard-won wisdom. The next time you hear an ancient tale of a great flood or a fallen star, listen a little more closely. You are not just hearing a fable. You might be hearing the faint but clear echo of a real disaster, a desperate warning from the past carried on the resilient voice of the present. Let these stories inspire you to look deeper at the world's oldest mysteries, to question comfortable assumptions, and to appreciate the incredible, enduring legacy of human knowledge and resilience. We would love to hear your own thoughts on these mysterious connections in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this journey into the unknown, subscribe for more explorations that challenge everything we think we know about history. The stories we have explored are not open-source archives for anyone to mine. They are the sacred inheritance of living cultures, a truth that demands an ethical approach to this entire endeavor. As we stand at the intersection of science and myth, we must tread with profound respect, recognizing that these narratives are not merely data points but the spiritual and historical lifeblood of descendant communities. The line between interpretation and appropriation is dangerously thin, taking a sacred story from an indigenous culture, stripping it of its spiritual context to fit a scientific hypothesis, and presenting it as a discovery without involving that culture is a form of intellectual colonialism. It repeats the historical pattern of extracting resources without giving anything back. The solution lies in genuine partnership and collaboration. This means researchers must engage with communities from the very beginning, not just as subjects of study, but as co-investigators and the ultimate authorities on their own traditions. It involves practicing reciprocity, where the pursuit of knowledge offers tangible benefits back to the community, whether through shared credit, educational resources, or support for cultural preservation efforts. This ethical framework transforms the process. Instead of an outsider declaring what a myth really means, it becomes a dialogue where Western science listens as much as it explains. It acknowledges that a tribal elder may hold insights into a geological event that no core sample can ever reveal, because their story contains the lived experience, the emotional truth that completes the cold, hard data. This respectful collaboration is not a limitation on knowledge, it is its liberation. it leads to a more nuanced, accurate, and humane understanding of our past. By honoring the keepers of these stories, we honor the stories themselves, ensuring that our quest to understand ancient cataclysms does not become another one. This final principle is the most crucial, for it ensures that our pursuit of truth is built on a foundation of respect, weaving a future for this knowledge that is as enduring as the myths themselves.